Well, what do you think of that sound? Was that sound disturbing that he made?
No, but it sounded a little bit like the camera was feeding
Yeah,
feeding
that
back.
happens too. Well, I am exploring ways, but I haven't really, again, I'm exploring, but I haven't done anything about it. You know what I mean? I didn't go get a treatment, and even though Spiro gave me a whole outfit here or whatever. But I do like that sound sometimes and just sitting with it when it vibrates in the room. So it doesn't have any intention. I'm just kind of doing relaxed body. Even if it's really doing something hard, I'm still coming from the sense of releasing the body. And then even if I'm lifting a weight on that machine there, it's still relaxed, the body, not so
Mm,
much muscular.
mhm.
So I know, and then also the clubs are pretty beautiful, the club exercises, because they've allowed me a kind of flexibility. Although we're about to have fires all around us.
Are they
And,
moving closer?
well, they don't say, they did say for the first time in the papers that we should be prepared to
Oh, really?
Oh,
for everything, but they didn't specify, although it's around us and the smoke comes through. We did buy a bunch of these air purifiers for the house.
mm-hmm.
Sandy is visiting us from California, and yeah, so there's a happening for the month of May that I'm just hanging out for. And again, Spiro is here, and he's doing the yoga thing. They're still trying, and so it's been okay, weird and okay at the same time. Just hanging out, people doing their thing.
It's always weird.
Well,
But
weird
it can be
look,
beautifully
look
weird.
at the room back there, and it's weird, you know. Okay.
Yeah, but
Space,
yeah,
it's a weird space.
it's beautifully weird.
So weird it is. I don't know if you can see it all back there, but
Oh,
at
yeah.
the same time, it's normal. What do you make of it? Oh, Catherine Ann Jones. Hi. Okay. So there's two gray-haired folks here, three gray-haired folks here. Okay.
My daughter
And
gave
there's
me a
three
hair.
over here also. Well, we are in the midst of a theater piece. Just by normal living, I think things are shifting and changing. I was kidding around with Segway that his move from the earth in the back, where somehow over years he had a kind of avoidance system, but then moving to the front room here, all of a sudden he's become a different Segway who jumps into things and fixes the working out in the back and doing this and
That's pretty
that,
cool.
fixing the thing out of this same active guy. And did we trick him into that, Catherine? What do you think?
It's nice. Don't
The
question.
only thing is that you don't want him to take over and run away from the place either. So you'd like it to still everything to come from that sentiment that it's not the existence is not now so much around survival, and the medical treatments are not so much around survival. They're around keeping the grace or maintaining a level of grace, not an artificial grace, but a consciousness. A consciousness that is not so fear oriented, but the consciousness then can look into the sea and have a conversation then with the doctor about what kind of treatment. But the treatment is not so much organized to extend the life, to do all this. It's in fact, the sadhana or the journey is now a predominant part of our expression, I think. Survival is again, the Uber driver of it, not so much the owner of it anymore. So I feel kind of that we die before we die, and that we have this free floating period that is not literal time, it's more evocative time. And I do feel what I'm finding out, and I think what something of kind knew originally, is that somehow you can have conversations with the body as if it was your partner. And you see, once you start to see that the body has been your partner, you see how secretive and how you've held information back from it and how you wouldn't do certain things. Okay, so then you're introduced to a partner really by kind of losing it. The pain has you reflecting. And when you reflect on it, you see the remarkableness of simply a coordinated, you see the remarkableness of having lived and the experience you've had, where it's not so much a possessive. A rare experience, no matter how much one tries to meditate in that, to be able to view one's own existence from the perspective of sitting in the front row seat watching the movie. But what is missing is the doer. You can't do anything about the experience you've had. And that means that one experiences the life in a multidimensional way for kind of the first time. Now I feel that most of us have attempted at a certain phase of our life where we've thrown ourselves into some creative process, whether it was literally creative in our world, in the art forms, or where one's life became sort of creative in essentially. And that there was a relationship to a genuineness that ran through the story that you had a relationship to. And that when there was a genuine expression and a shared feeling, it opened up doors that were kind of hidden in plain sight, but kind of needed a creative feeling for them to be revealed. Is this too far-fetched, Catherine? Because I'm going to go into stream of, we're about to leave the planet. So let's say any perception of this, and it may come through tragedy, fear, hope, but like any glimpse of the life, the other dimensions of the life being lived, which one in the creative form tries to access what really happened, as if there's a literal reality, but you do discover dimensions of reality that affect it, hidden in plain sight. I feel that there's enough folks visiting here in town from the past that we've shared, that there are moments waiting that I simply have to hang out for. In fact, watch Netflix or something like that, but I have to simply be for this month, because there are certain creative experiences hanging in the air, and they may go from a punch in the head to a kiss. But if it literalizes, or if it says, holy shit, what a shared experience it has been. And you then have a perception of that, not to get rid of, we're no longer giving the psyche the ownership of the story, so we no longer have to outwit it. The psyche is, in fact, the Uber driver of a creative event that is unfolding. And so it has literal instructions about what address to go to or whatever. But the experience at this point in time is, I think there's moments where you discover where you kind of die before you die. Now that may take the form of some issue throwing you into a grief or something like that, where grief is the dominant factor. But then I also say perceptively that you may experience an irrelevance to the literal world that has you living in a dying process while you're living. And folks may wave at you as they pass or ask if you're okay. But no one's asking you how you feel or what you're doing, because immediately you start telling, okay. So let's say the irrelevance is not exactly irrelevance, is seeing the place from a different space. And as the self is diminished, as it agrees to the different space, it has insights into the picture. Just because the doer is no longer the owner of the story. When one's own story is released, you see what was hidden in plain sight all along, the thread that ran through it. I think from the perspective of having died before you died, this, we don't need the phrase any longer, but you see the perception. That space becomes creative space in itself. It is no longer survival space that's the owner of the story. The only aspect for survival was to create a space so the theater can happen. But money was the money meant freedom from money. It didn't mean continuing to make more and more and literalizing. For us, somehow money meant allowed to be creative, allowed to be free to experience this life. And I feel to some degree, in retrospect, there are moments when you discover, in fact, that it's almost have been all a creative experience, weirdly enough. Of course, it's been literal all along, and the logic of literal continuity is there. But then you have perspectives of your life where somehow it needed certain accidents to change the venue, certain experiences. So then you see the creativity running through the normal life. But when the person experiences the creativity running through the normal life, it's usually when they've lost it, or in some cases, thrown it away. And when it comes, then you start to see all the psychological elements that come when one is actually living a creative life, but one is also dominated by a survival life. It makes the decisions for their life from the survival while they've been in a creative mode. You see there are hurts that run through the story. Because most of the relations you met came out of a human feeling, and then most of the movements came out of survival. And when there was an individual survival, when competition entered into a cooperative, then you see there would come in a form of betrayal or hurt or something like that, but a broken heart was inherently in the story. It was just waiting for the incident. The incident didn't cause it. The incident reflected something that was happening. When the feeling shifted in the form started to shift. And when the form starts to shift, it becomes more individualistic, it seems, in its survival. I'm going into science here and stumbling into it. But we could see in our lives, a feeling gives a reality something that opens up a doorway. And the shifting in those feelings. And so sometimes you can see that it looked like a literal moment when it broke, but you see it was breaking. So the literal moment is revelatory, but you see it was in the process. That there are hey baby moments waiting in the story. That in the elements of the story is a recognition of a shifting of feelings. And it's not to reclaim the feeling. The hey baby conversation means that you're free. But the basis of our carrying on again is because we have agreed to do it. Not so much out of fear of continuity or survival, but there's a hey baby moment hidden in every story that one resists, that one fears or whatever, but there is a moment of reflection, a shared reflection. And I feel then from that space, one re-enters the story no longer dominated by a history, no longer dominated by a karma. You see, I feel that the perception changes the karma to a dharmic element, where you see the fluidity of your life. As we literalize it, we see how it was always in flux. And I feel that in perceiving the flux, you then have a different relationship with the so-called normalcy, the so-called literalness of survival. I feel you almost start to see the life as a creative act itself. And that time and space are relative to the literal individual. Time and space has a birth date and a death date, but to the evocative experience, when the story is somewhat released, then you're living in creative time. And I think when you're living in creative time, all the elements that were there in organized life change. As we were talking before, the 8-hour sleep mode which some of us force ourselves to sleep. And then you reveal, oh, that was related to a kind of workaday industrial revolution. Most of the world didn't live according to that. They had different sleep patterns according to how they were living. But just the reading of that we were doing that anyway. But the reading of that freed the story from having to lie there at 3:00 in the morning,
Mhm.
and try to force yourself. There was no longer a forcing. You saw it was natural to wake up. And there was a kind of naturalness where you were creating your own sleep. You were just like you were creating your own food patterns and things like that. You were then instrumentally involved in caring for it, not so much in direction, but somehow you recognize the relationship to your body almost as a relationship and as a primary relationship. And I feel then, in the creative sense, there are conversations that happen. But as we kid around with Urjo, they say, okay, could we give it another year? And I feel that's actually time has shifted. And that
Yes.
there's certain things you'd like to be here for and hang out for. And I feel you can create that time. The time is more of a
Yeah.
creative expression that happens to be literal time, but it's not literal time that owns the story. It's kind of evocative time. You see, even in becoming a doula, a death doula, you see that you are managing this living and dying experience. And then you're meeting other people who have glimpses of that living and dying process also.
Yes.
Now, they may come from a medical perspective or a spiritual perspective, or whatever. But let's say you have a perception of living and dying simultaneously.
Yeah.
And you saw then that the religious being is somewhat different than the religion. Did I just lose Catherine?
She's
Yeah.
not here. I don't know.
That was quick. Yes.
Maybe she usually says goodbye. Maybe it disconnected.
Maybe she remembered something she had to
Maybe. We get into the world of maybe
Yeah.
when it's a normal thing. Especially how we're relating to these computers. It goes all the time like that, isn't it? How are you there?
Okay. Thanks, Danny. Good to see you.
Okay, well, we were talking about something very, again, this flux and the perception of the flux and how time is somewhat different when, in other words, a retrospect, when you get a glimpse of the life or a deep sense of the life being lived, not as your ownership of it, but your experience of it. Then you will see dimensions of it are revealed to you when it is not literally your ownership. That the things that happen in time were happening. So you then get a glimpse of a happening, but you see that most of the folks are related to the thing that happened. But when you look at it, you see the process of unfolding taking place in the everyday. And that somehow the people, especially in relationships, somehow the people are intuiting it while it's happening. And but then it's in the literal happening that you think that the event really took place, but you also see the event. It's like the building's pipes were never looked at, and then all of a sudden one day they exploded, but they all kind of knew that they never looked at it, they didn't take care of it. So it's not, there's just an event hidden in plain sight that's coming out of a process that you're in. And especially when the process was a relationship that had a feeling to it. And in the literalization of the relationship, if the feeling starts to shift, then it does seem that you start to have events reflecting that. So what we logically do is attempt to deal with the events or this or that. but the events are also revelatory, not the doer doing something about it, but because what we're talking about is not so much, one is built to avoid in order to continue.
Yeah.
But then there is a moment waiting because the continuity is not satisfying to the soul of the story. So it's like you saved at sea and you left in the bottom of a boat. And I said, okay, you can do a month in the bottom of the boat. It's better than being at sea, but now you need to be free to live a life. So you understand that somehow when the energy is being contained in a situation, there's a kind of yearning to express oneself. And that yearning starts to find ways to do it. The ways are reflective of the level of yearning. Not so much a thing in themselves, but you can see in the choices that the person is making how deep it is going. Because, and what deep meant is that you discover dimensions of your life. And when you discover those dimensions of your life, the life starts to become more of a creative act that you're caring for. You understand why there's a natural inclination then for you to care.
Yeah.
Because you see that your caring has given you a life. It's giving you an expression that allows you to meet friends. And so a kind of friendship has allowed a kind of, what do? I rub your neck. I give you a reading. And I say, no, I share the mystery with you.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of break from your regular life. I share the mystery for you. The problem is that in sharing the mystery with you, it may mess up your regular life. Because if in fact you get a reading or you have a sharing, then you may start yearning to have love in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You may see that you're agreeing not to. You're agreeing to, okay. So at that point in time, your presence brings a dimension of reflection. Even in a simple conversation or whatever, you see your presence brings a level of where the person won't just awakens to that sense of a shared expression, meaning a perception takes place.
Yes.
And there is a hey baby moment. Hey baby moment as I see you. Not that it's so much we've gotten used to you that that's normal, but that I see all the phases of dying, living, all the dimensions that we've lived through in the moment. So moments you'll have of that. You'll get a glimpse of the parallel life being lived while the everyday is going on. And you'll start to see from the perception, the everyday has a remarkable dimension to it. So then if I think I'm hanging around for certain experiences floating around there, and I'm not influencing it in a way, but kind of waiting for it to happen, only because I'm kind of relating to some genuineness that is not saying that what happened between us all was some flaw or fault or something like that. But I am also saying that everything that happened to us was written into a theater of experience. And so then when you meet, let's say, an incident in the past where it breaks up, but then you meet them 30 years later where they're dying, and so you're meeting where you really understood what the experience was that you shared. And you aren't caught up in the literal aspect. And you say, holy shit, this mutual dying between us has revealed this whole creative experience that we've had. And so you see that you acted out in a movie. You get to see the life because you can't do anything about it. You see it from the audience's perspective, but not only the audience, but a fan. You see a fan, you become a fan of Urja, and you watch Urja's movie. And isn't that amazing? That's what fans are when they interpose life of their own. So you see, you become a fan of Urja, and you say, holy shit, look what she did. You become your own fan, not in terms of nuts and having your own podcast, but you may do that if you wish. but in terms of seeing, getting a glimpse of the existence that you've just had. And you see that the basis of you getting a look and seeing a full movement of it is a non-attachment, non-ownership of the story that comes perceptively. You've never owned the story. It's an illusion that you were born that day and you were born this day. You took a shape that day. And once you take a shape, then it's moving in time and space. We've been exploring the difference in times here with Einstein and this fellow's nice book, The 7 Brief Lessons on Physics, that I told you, Carlo Novella, but he's very nice. And he was telling you a little bit about what was happening with Einstein alone and the family and, and the situation and the discoveries. And so he's very much an intimate physicist that likes beat poets and this and that. So he's kind of integrated the forms, and he's Buddhist, but he's integrated the forms. So it was very nice. I mentioned him. He was in the New York Times a few weeks ago, right? He went from, but it was very nice. So it's nice for me to dip in some of these books, and it kind of reflects on something that's happening anyway, what do you say, Ursha? But you see in yourself, and you also see that somehow in our goofy conversation, we've created a climate
Yes.
where the life is malleable. It's not only measured by, because the time is moving, in literal time, years are moving so quickly, but for virus time, it was all one day, one big month that we've been in or something like that. And so everything you were doing in the climate of the virus was almost surrealistic.
Yeah.
Not only the mask and the vaccinations in the story, but the surrealism of the everyday. So let's say I go to Sam's Club, and what's supposedly normal for the world is a really weird mystery for me. I want to see if I can do a citizen or a person or something and walk around and know what I'm talking about and go shopping. But holy shit, it's I'm in there walking around doing this. It's like a magical weird thing. And I'm saying hello and having conversations with people. But I do have a sense that it is normalized. What to me would be very weird to go into Sam's Club. It's a very weird scene anyway there. I don't know if you've been to Sam's Club or whatever. But anyway, what would be very weird anyway is normal. But then someone has a conversation with me about why they're living, and their kids gave them a life, but they don't. And so I find myself, I'm sitting down waiting for Mary to finish the shopping there, and these conversations become very soulful at the same time. They're the folks,
Yeah.
and it's a regular thing going on. You see that somehow there's soulful conversations going on in everyone's life without it being, and yet it's just every day going on. So it's happening anyway. The only thing is there are moments when it's revealed. And when it's revealed, it changes the picture. When something is revealed, then they're no longer entering into, in other words, you read your mother's diary, as they say. And once it's revealed how deep a person she was, who was not only your mother, your eye releases the story. And it also forgives by its own seeing. It sees events that have happened from a different perspective, what the person was going through, and but you have to perceive. Once you perceive it, then you start to see the mystery running through the history. And then you see the beginnings of much of the, like we'll see even homeopathy, where they saw there was a mystery hidden in the history. But that somehow they had to change their idea of the history for them to discover this. So then they went beyond the norm. They would start to see, like the 8-hour sleep and all that was really organized around the social fabric of having people work. So they reward people who would do that. But then the people who can't do it, wasn't that they couldn't do it, that it was rearranging them in such a way that wasn't natural. So they would have problems if they had a day based on an 8 hour sleep and they weren't sleeping. You would start to see. So holy shit, you start to see almost as if it was like the people who were selling the opiates. They knew they were addicting you. And then they were going to sell you kits to get out of the addiction once you got addicted. And you saw, okay, man, it's like a heartless thing. And then you also saw that the systems that they had were organizing because that's what that's what they needed or wanted from you. But it was kind of distorting your health, distorting the style of life. And they say, why? Because you saw that the people had their own natural sleeps. If you were a nursing mother, you would get up in the middle of the night, maybe. If you were caring for animals or had a farm, you would get up in the middle of the night and go back to sleep, create your own sleep. You started to see if you were artisans or if you were a traveling musician or something like that, you had your capacity to rearrange your sleeping pattern. But once it was organized into a literal pattern, that became the norm, but it was no longer explained to you why it was the norm, but it became the norm. You discovered it wasn't the norm. You discovered a lot of problems came out of trying to fit yourself into a circumstance that really wasn't your expression. And that you would be punished for it in some way. If in fact you were not, you couldn't do slavery well as a job, and that so somehow you would be a failure when in fact in retrospect it wasn't a failure. It was brilliantly, you found a way out of prison. You found a way out of something that wasn't true for you. So I'm saying not to give a silver lining on everything, but to say the screw up historically then turns out to be brilliant in terms of how it kept something in itself still kind of pure. So I feel there's a stage that happens when that shifts and the person re-enters the life no longer from the historical self. But there is a perception that now what you're doing, you're doing. Not because your parents did it, not so much this or that, but if you're in a situation, it's because somehow creatively it's happening for you. You discover now if you are the one that is no longer driven, then the survival of that character is not the main feature. What is your creative freedom, where we don't have to live a lie, we don't have to live it underground. That the things that were pure we made to be ashamed of because they interfere with the status quo. And so they took on that look. But then if you look, you see, no, the person somehow had a relationship to a feeling. And that relationship to a feeling, when it was true, gave an expression. And true wasn't the true of the world around survival or this or that. The feeling was true around the feelings that allowed a creative happen to take place. But it wasn't true around the feelings of it continuing in that mode. So when it continued, then there would be issues that would come up around the literalization, because something that happened when you fell in love, it wasn't there. How are we going to survive? What are we going to do? And this and that. But then once you are in the story, you come to moments of how we're going to survive, where the survival becomes the main feature. And then it's not fault or anything, but you start to see form shifting and changing. So when the survival becomes the main feature, the feelings start to diminish as being naive. So there is the literalization of the form that makes it subject to its own dissolution while it's continuing. So there are events waiting in it, neither good nor bad. But there's moments when there's a hey baby conversation waiting. Do we want to do this thing? Are we still into it? Not because you have to, but because there is an agreement that it be a true thing, that it be a real feeling. So then you see there are moments when the creative expression is a shared space, and that who it's shared with are kind of creatively on board with it. Now, whether that's spelled out or not, I can't say, but that somehow there is I feel that there are invitations that are creatively subtle, but that much of our actions are related to these parallel movements that are taking place. So to some extent, we could say, Ursula, we've lived a life. What do you think? You want an Academy Award or a Grammy?
No, I don't. No, I don't need that. I'm sure of that.
Is there some sense in the idea that it's not only the literalness of aging, but that somehow one is also participating in a process that's happening?
Yes.
And that somehow you're even caring for the pain as if you're caring for a baby. And I say, why? I say, because there was something in the cuckoo in taking care of the baby that was equally, is equal to the medicine, was
Yeah.
the feeling, giving or caring or nudging. So let's say one then sees the baby in their life, not as, it doesn't have to be overwhelmingly schmaltz, but you see somehow that you have been caring for something. And that is the main element that's happening for you, is that you're caring for something, and that somehow you have gotten the cooperation of the body and circumstance
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
So to some extent, how you got a place in Boulder, Colorado,
Yeah.
You got it specifically so that you can care for your kids. They say, what was the mystery? It gives you all sorts of philosophy about Buddha, but you understood that somehow her kids were in her being. And that somehow you had to be there for them, whatever the philosophy or circumstance. And it wasn't spelled out. And even if they gave you a kick in the culo for being too much, you can't say anything. It's just like no one can say anything to you. They say, no, don't run away with that boyfriend. No, don't do it. That guy doesn't have a job. Did you ever hear anything like that before, Kai? Do you have a job? Do you have this? Do you have that? Okay.
No, my parents didn't have any say.
They never got it. They never got involved.
My dad probably would have, but I didn't let him.
Yeah, no. So you
I was
made
too
sure they
strong.
couldn't. Yeah, because you knew what would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I think now I'm looking back at it. Sure, never got involved with the family until it was already established. So then, yeah. So then I said, holy. Must have been pretty remarkable, because even coming back from India and doing this, and it must have been a whole strange life to them. And strange life in retrospect now, but normal. It was normal for us to go to India. It was normal. We were discussing it this morning, how I had to get a job for 10 weeks to get the money to go to India that time. And it was the dumbest. My mother-in-law got me a job. She was a bookkeeper for these mafia guys who were making Venetian blinds. And when I got there, they had all these people from other countries that were crappy. They were working with crappy paint and stuff like that. And of course, I became friends with them, so they didn't trust me. The bosses didn't trust me because I was seeing what they were doing. But all I had to do was last 11 weeks there, But what a weird trip it was to do that, because it was shitty. The normal things that they were doing, selling stuff and doing this, was in order to make a buck, they had to really be creepy in how they treated people and stuff like that. So that was what you would run up against all the time. You were actually those people. They thought you were cooler than that, and you were this and that. but you actually have more feelings for those people that they were doing that shit to than you had in being in their crowd. You know, you knew you didn't fit in that crowd anyway. So let's say you discover this whole journey, and it really has this holy shit element to it where it seemed bullshit on the surface, and yet in retrospect you see almost a holy thread running through the story, and that something saved your life again and again and again. The dumbest thing, or this happening, and then you see that leaving a relationship, this happening, that shifting was not wrong. As a matter of fact, you've lived, it was wrong in the literal world of measurement, but it was a remarkable creative experience. And it was never literal, it was always in flux. And you get to see a life always in movement, that people are trying to literalize as normal in the everyday and make that normal, but it is not for some of us, it's a creative life. So if it's a false everyday to accommodate survival, there starts to be a hurt in our being because there's something genuine in us. And I feel that that genuineness then creates a reality for itself, that if it's a shared life, it's because there's a feeling shared between the people. And as that shifts, I think the circumstance shifts. Okay. I feel I'm in that now where some, as I say, people are coming and going in a circumstance, so things are up in the air. At the same time, there's just a simple everyday. But again, we're surrounded by these fires and we don't know what exactly that means. It was the first time in the paper that they kind of said you should be ready to evacuate if necessary, which we have done nothing at all. You know, I mean, not even. So then since Sandy is here, visiting, and they've come out of the fires in Santa Rosa and this and that. We may start just readying some stuff in case the fires was. But the biggest thing for me has been the smoke,
Yeah.
the smoky air, you know. But still okay. I'm doing the breathing techniques in a way that's, and the air purifiers should be okay. But then there are some smoke days with the red skies or whatever that are pretty dense.
Yeah.
So at the same time, it's around us. We've been spared the fire and stuff like that. And we've been having to deal every now and then with the smoke and these like 50-mile-an-hour winds that are coming,
Wow.
you know. But at the same time, it seems okay. How's it going up there in Boulder then, Urgent?
Well, the weather has been perfect for a few days.
Yeah,
The whole
that's
time.
weird.
Yes, that was wonderful. The weather is wonderful right now.
Is anyone else on?
Jimmy and Carrie.
Okay. Can wave to them. So what do you think? What's been happening? I'm still enjoying this interaction. Is that okay for you? You're enjoying it? And I feel that it's had effects. And what do you think,
Yes.
Derek? Are you still okay with the schedules that we have? Or
Yeah, it seems to work
now
fine.
I think that, well, Spiro must be doing podcasts there, or he's doing his yoga. Is he podcasting also? No, he's just, he has students, yeah. And I think that he wanted me to do a podcast there a week, and I still don't. Do you do podcasts, Kai?
No,
Do you know how to do podcasts?
I think I could figure it out
Yeah.
easily.
And Derek, do you do podcasts?
I've been doing TikTok. I mean, it seems like it's all under this umbrella of content creation. So a podcast would be something I could, if I were to speak for 30 minutes to an hour or something like that on things I've been reading, that would be,
Yeah.
you know, I could see a podcast being on YouTube. Like this could be considered a podcast, I think, you know.
But to
Okay.
put it on a podcast platform. Some
Yeah,
people will
that's-
put their podcast on a podcast platform and YouTube.
Right. That's
Yeah.
what, yeah.
So he was suggesting that for me one day a week, right, Mary? But so we'll see. But maybe you also let me know how it speaks to you. I'll ask him to touch base with you all.
Yeah.
But so far here, seems okay.
So sweet.
It's been so sweet. Let's see. There must be a smack in the face coming. Just to settle it. But everyone's okay for the week. We'll keep it together. So let's do that. We're kind of intimate with the life. The life says, "Okay, do you want another week or two to play with?" And I said, "Sure. Let's see how it goes." We know that there's some weird moment waiting,
Yes.
and somehow you have to be true to the weird moment. You know that you're talking to. We call it the mystery. Some would call it talking to Jesus. Some would call, you see, they all try to figure out what that happens. Even the crossing of the fingers and all that. All of those were elements of talking to yourself, they would say, but no, it's like a kind of private conversation with the self. It happens sometimes when you meet a stranger and you have a conversation about nothing and it goes to a very soulful place, a moment in the moment. You see that there is a soulful conversation going on in your own life. And then once you become aware from it, it actually expresses itself. But there's a parallel movement going on while one is surviving, living, and that is a soulful existence. And when you perceive it, you start making choices from the soulful life. So then the soulful life has a different time. How would I be? In other words, if let's say I was in a situation we were talking earlier, where well, we were talking about where I had to give a name for the children. And when I came into the hospital, they were prematurely. I was just calling the phone, "Please come." They need a name. That's all they needed from me was a name, because they were preparing for the child to die. And the child was premature, a pound and a half. It was beet red in an incubator, and it was doing a downward dog, believe it or not, a beet red, but you could almost see through it. It was kind of translucent.
Mm.
And they were expecting the child to die. And they needed a name very quickly for their religion or whatever, the Jewishness or whatever, because their grandfather died. So then there was Miles, and because we were listening to Miles Davis, so they needed an M name. So we said Miles Lenny Bruce was the name, but it wasn't actually my child. I was away for those years anyway, but I took the responsibility for it. But they were all waiting for the baby to die, and they needed a name quick. And I was sent away 4 days later. And then years later, someone came up to me there, this beautiful couple, and they wanted to adopt it. They said their daughters loved him. And I think my wife was really using high drugs and strung out then. And
Mm.
but these people, so I agreed almost to save the life. But they only wanted me for the name. I was out of the picture in every other way,
Mm.
It seemed, And so then my agreement was for it to be free. That I would be here if it came to me, but I would not pursue a circumstance. I was letting the. So that's the funny thing, that it doesn't spell out, but somehow, in the creative sense, that the doer is not the boss of the moment, that you have to be there for a certain experience. And in being there for the experience, you may get a smack in the head or a kiss that releases the story, as you once told me, where you went back in time and somehow released the story that no matter what the people did, they could not get rid of that memory or that experience. And then you see that some event happens, and it's usually around someone dying or some loss or whatever, where there's a hey baby moment in it, and you see the story from a different place. It releases the story. To some extent, Michelle's passing away released the story in some ways because it revealed a whole world that I didn't know anything about.
Mm.
And how people were still connected in that world. So I'm finding in many of the people that I'm meeting that we shared a life with that almost everyone's created an expression for themselves. And everyone's taken a piece of the energy and created an expression for themselves in some way. And yet they're doing their thing specifically. That's specific to them.
Yeah.
What do you say, Derek? How you doing? Are you doing okay?
Yeah, I was just feeling gratitude, I think, for the life in that.
Yeah, well, gratitude comes from the word grace. Grace is a perception of something, and you see grace ran through the story, even in the hurt. Even so, then you see happiness doesn't mean being happy. That's to sell products. They make a happy product. Happiness is to have the whole experience, the whole human experience. And you see why. I said, because the angel wished to have the whole experience, not to modify it, not to trick it. It was an angel already. So nothing threatens it in the literal life. The literal life is the phase. From that perspective, the literal life is a phase of the life, not the thing itself. And it's to have experience. It's almost as if the soul comes into a literal expression to have the experience. And when it experiences a world without soul, it experiences a broken heart. That inherently the survival premise then splits between you and me into a competition where then you can kill and do anything necessary in order to survive. The premise of your survival being the death of the other. So then you also understand that once you're locked into that, it's missing. There's a loneliness that runs through the story that's profound. And the loneliness is covering up an aloneness. And I say, what's the difference between the loneliness and the aloneness? I said, the loneliness acts itself out in the world around survival. The aloneness is like a tree alone, next to another tree alone. In their aloneness, they share an experience and a situation, but it's a shared life. It's an I and thou, consciously. Now it may normalize the I and thou. But then once it literalizes into continuity or to survival, then there's an issue that will usually happen that will force it to reflect. And I say, why? Because it says, to some element running through your life is a spiritual journey. While you are doing you, while you are living, while you're surviving, while you're working, while you're doing everything like that, there is a spiritual journey without it being too much shtick and schlock. I'm talking about the normalcy of the life is hiding a spiritual journey. And that when folks met around this, around music, around creativity, around religion, then in fact attempting to make contact with an element that they're intuiting runs in themselves. So it looks like show business and it looks like this and it looks like that, but it is a relationship to the mystery, a dialogue and a conversation with the mystery in your dreams, in your aloneness, in your love relationships. There's a conversation with the mystery in the story. And when you're conscious of that, the mystery is the life. And so it normalizes where the mystery is a creative expression of yours, where it's become second nature to you now to sing or to do this or to prepare a thing or to create something, because inherently the creative expression is coming from the life. And it's not so much around the doer. What's that noise?
It was a car outside
Oh, yeah.
beeping.
Maybe the ending of our thing, yeah. So you start to see then the agreements that you have in relationship are not literal, they're evocative. It's a shared experience. When they literalize around a theme, what would that mean? Let's say you're in Ukraine together and you both have to agree to get the hell out of there quickly.
Mhm.
But there's an agreement to survive that suppresses all the other things. Okay. But that's a temporary thing. The agreement to survive as a long-lasting thing is a diminishing of something. So there are moments when survival is because you have shared feeling, then the survival is an important fact. But when the literal survival is there, especially if it individualizes, then the other stops being a thou. So let's say the perception of a shared experience means it's normal. And what does it mean that we have a feeling that allows us to do this thing normally? The discovery of that thing in loss is to discover a whole other dimension that was there in your life that normalized. And you kind of discover it in losing it. Not as a threat. The psyche doesn't own the story around that time, so its experience doesn't own the story. You understand that a feeling gave you a relationship to something. Without that feeling, that relationship is missing. And you feel them missing in different phases in the world that look like what's happening. But what's happening is you're missing that feeling. So whether it takes the form of a neck ache, a backache, or this, or psychological this, or whatever is going on, it has its ramification. You see, one is having a dialogue, even in relationship and absence. When there is a literal relationship there, while you're separated from this, still exists for you. Remarkableness of a parallel conversation in time and space, as if it's normal. And then even in death, sometimes you're still having that conversation as if it's normal, but it's not dependent on the form. You see, a form was the basis of the experience, but was no longer the owner of the experience. And you see that you are in it to have the experience. And you see that once you are creatively in it to have the experience, it's the whole experience. It's not masochistic or this or pursuing that. There is a whole experience inherently in the life. And that when that perspective happens, invitations happen, accidents take place. It is no longer that world where you're so dependent on it or related to it or you study it. You see that somehow, once it's perceived in you, creative invitations start to happen in the everyday. And you see that you're in a creative circumstance yourself. And there will be moments when you're going to have a hey baby conversation. Where are we? And it's not only a psychological conversation, it's not owned by the psyche. It's in fact a creative conversation that happens when some issue then causes some reflection. And the reflection, what is a reflection? Then you see in your friend yourself, just as if you were looking at a mirror. And then when you're looking at the mirror, it's an honest looking at the mirror. It's no longer laying a trip on the mirror. And it reflects back to you. So I feel that this is the mode that we're in our life anyway, that it is in flux. And the different features of it. You're still into it, Derek?
Yeah.
San Francisco and what you're doing, yeah?
Oh, specifically, I don't know. I'm still into the exploration of it all, wherever that leads.
And how are you doing then, Kai?
Physical things are coming up in my body.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I guess that's where I'm at right now, seeing where that leads. I mean, Alfred was correct. I got tested with the thyroid thing. So Alfred was correct with the thyroid diagnosis.
Yeah. And was it hyper or hypo?
I don't know yet. I just got the blood test yesterday and I went to see my doctor. I found a great doctor though. She's very integrative.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
But you can call her, you can call Ursula immediately, since she's a veteran of the experience. Since she's, well, let's say, what are we talking about? And we say, from the physical point of view, we're talking about circadian rhythms that are supplied by the movement of the sun. And so therefore there is a system, a thyroid condition that can be hyper or hypo. And hypo is not giving enough nutrients to the body. The thyroid then is sending messages to the body. And okay, so if it's in hypo, then it's not sending enough energy to certain levels of the body or whatever. And they can even measure how much it's that even in the breathing may be affected to some degree. And if it's hyper, which is sometimes there in pre-diabetic people where they come into the room quick and they already have strong opinions and they,
Mhm.
so you see the hyper then takes over the story in a way.
Mhm.
So then you see the remarkableness that you've been doing with your body has been balancing this hypo
Mhm.
thing when it
And
needs.
my iron's low again too. So that's in there too.
Generally, hypo and hyper are a choice that one is making. I want to meditate, let me do hypo. I want to work out there, let me do hyper. And that's in fact some of the so-called marijuana that was fixing you, was that the female plant that came out of the indica was hypo,
Mm.
meaning that it was mañana, you put things off until tomorrow. So and they say, well, how would I have done the virus thing if it was left to me? And they say, oh, you want to get vaccinated? So maybe tomorrow or next week. So I would have found my own way, not of not doing it, but somehow it had to speak to me in a way.
Mm.
So once Mary had to kind of do it to be honorable about what she was doing, and Brenda did also, then I allowed myself just to go with that invitation into the story. But on my own, left to my own thing, I don't know that I would have literally done anything to save my life or done anything like that. I didn't think that my life was so dependent now at this stage with what they're talking about. It was more a phase of purely being there for the process that you've been in, and seeing. And then it is where the past people coming into the present. So you see there are moments waiting. So then I feel that you become aware generally and pretty deeply that the journey is the life.
Mhm.
And that you see the effect that you've had, and you get a chance to see it. In other words, it's usually withheld, but others could see for you because for us, seeing is discovery. So if you discover the life you've lived, so let's say a slow process is not entirely wrong. That was part of your philosophical framework. It's part of Urge's philosophical framework, a kind of quietness in themselves. And okay, but
Yes.
you also see that the quietness in yourself is actually a juggling of the thyroid.
Mhm.
And you see a process going on in the body that's amazing, light and process and agreements and it's almost like a parent. The thyroid gland then becomes like a parent trying to, it doesn't have the rent money, doesn't know what to do. So you start to see literal processes in the world that resemble processes that are happening in the body,
Mm.
where it's attempting to make do, where it's attempting to survive, where it's attempting, okay, where it'll give in. And you start to see the living process happening in your being, but in seeing it, you have a relationship to it, almost as if, how did the angel get into the world that had a baby that it raised? Okay, so then it had the experience of raising a baby. That's what supposedly the godlike experience was. The angel coming into the world had the experience by becoming the baby, having the baby experience of what it meant to exist. Okay, where some forces looked out for you all the time. And yet it was a mystery to you what was happening to you. And yet all these forces were trying to look out for you. And so to experience life from the perceptive sense, where it's not your life, where when it's your life, you have to cover up certain aspects of it in order to survive or to continue. But when you stumble into life that you've lived, you see that what you were saying before, there's a kind of purity to it. And it's not the purity that they can own or sell or anything like that. It's that there is a relationship to something genuine that has given you a life that somehow,
Yeah.
and then when it collapses or it no longer feels that way, it starts to collapse. So it looks like the fights and the arguments and the trips are making it collapse. And I say, no, it is collapsing. Those are reflections of something that's changing,
Yeah.
not causal.
Mhm.
But people are acting out because they have a feeling still, and yet they're trying to be out of it and free of it. So it plays out in the world. You see almost everything is missing that conversation, but you see that conversation has to be a true thing, a heartfelt thing. So it's only when folks realize what happened that they may be able to say, I'm sorry, baby, without it being so overwhelming. I'm sorry, Trip, but I'm sorry, baby, I see the move. Okay.
Yeah.
It releases the story, the perception, but I don't think it can be faked because everyone kind of intuitively knows each other.
Yeah.
Should we give it a shot for a while longer? What about you, Ursula? But you can also call in now around thyroid since you've got 40 years. Huh? When did you get diagnosed with that, Ursula?
I was in Santa Fe. I had a little bulge on my neck, and
Yeah.
I was afraid it would be cancer. And the doctor he said it's your thyroid. He gave me some medication, and it went the bulge went away right away.
Okay, but then you become aware that the thyroid is balancing.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes when you want it to be hyper, it can be hyper. And when you want it to be hypo, out of choice. If you want to meditate, you're going to make it high. So you see, out of choice, you've been doing that anyway.
Well, I meditate a lot, so maybe that's.
So basically, I feel that the thing that Mary is growing for me and what I've been doing, it's the very thing. It's I'm having a hypo. I'm creating a hypo body in that, which to me is everything that I'm doing. Even if I lift a weight or something, it comes from a relaxed body.
Yeah.
So I'm attempting then to have the body kind of be relaxed itself. And I'm finding that you can do all the things you can do. Even it doesn't have to be a muscular body. You don't have to lift for strength. That somehow you could even be relaxed and lift a heavy weight.
Mhm.
So that's more what I'm practicing is a kind of, and I say, why? I say, because, in the literal sense, most of us will be, especially with the hypo and hyper, you'll be challenged with a floating infection again,
Mhm.
or that there's an irritation in the body that's floating. And so I feel, and then there's an over immune reaction.
Yeah, I do think
They're
I
calling
think I
that
have that with
lupus.
my tooth.
They're calling that lupus now, and you've read a bit more about lupus, but do check out lupus just to see there are sorts of lupus where the immune system is overreacting,
Yeah.
and so then that once you're aware of that, now there is one young woman who teaches yoga here who then has that lupus that she's having real challenging time. I felt that when I looked at it with the swollen foot and all that there was a thing called Raynaud's syndrome that had something of the overreaction. It wasn't fatal or this or that, but what it did have was that there can be an infection in the body through that form or whatever, just over a simple thing. You may just have a small cut or a simple thing that all of a sudden takes off. So, but probably we are in that, guys, having lived the way you've been living all these years and eating and the way we've been sharing, we don't fit into the literal form like that. So I think that just the way you eat and how you've been living, you would be hypo.
Yeah,
It's not
definitely.
hypo,
I
it's-
would think
Hypo
hypo.
also comes pretty close to a meditative life.
But it
So,
also means that I gain weight if I eat
yeah,
anything. I hardly eat anything. But then she told me I need to eat more and I need more protein, so I might just have to gain weight, I guess.
You don't necessarily gain weight. I mean,
yeah, I don't know that you have, if in fact they are
I don't think.
the part of the hypo you wanted for a kind of meditative life.
Right.
If in fact medically the hypo is showing a deficiency, so it's not getting you don't want a hectic life or an active life. What you like to do is restore the balance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what you're doing is restoring the balance, where you see there was a reason for a mellow life or quieting it down. But then you also see that if the body is then, if they're showing you medically this is happening for you, well, it's happening for you. Light and exposure, all of those are having an effect on what you're doing. So I think that here I'm pursuing a kind of hypo body in some way, not pursuing it, but creating a stage for that. But at the same time, you could also understand now I'm not going in to get a checkup that I know something is happening in the body. If I'm talking to Marty, something similar is happening to me at the same time. But I also feel I've kind of agreed to be here for the month of May for whatever happens. I don't want to be captured so much medically in anything. And so I'm seeing if the body will agree with me on that. But I do feel something is changing and something is shifting for me. And we'll see what that is if I can. So to me, it's not only avoidance in the literal sense, but kind of creatively, I think I can get an agreement with my body and, to say, oh, like this is what's happening also, and we'll do this or that. So at the same time, I'm not exactly lost as to the larger picture. But to me, the life now is more, especially at this age and circumstance, it is around the journey
Yeah.
primarily and what's best for the journey.
Mm.
And then the treatment or the not treatment is okay. In fact, when I go in there, I give the doctor a pen and I tell jokes, in order to humanize the situation a little bit like that, And so you find that often that you go into situations that are normal out there, but are really weird in what they think is normal. Okay. And that, and to save your life at all costs, and you say, hold it, you don't have to save it at all costs. They say you have to put on your refrigerated door, don't save me, because
Mm.
if the meds come in, they have to save you. That's their job. And I say, well, hold it, you don't have to save me that bad or whatever. They say, no, the only way you can be free from that is legally. You have to get a doctor's permission with a sign on your refrigerated door. Don't do this to me. Don't do that to me to save my life. It's okay.
Yeah.
Let me go. But, and then people are talking more and more about, I'm hearing regular people talking about end of life situations that they're attempting to prepare for. But that usually means wills and stuff like that. It doesn't.
Right.
But you see that what you're having is more the possibility of heartfelt conversations coming into the moment.
Yeah.
The only thing is heartfelt conversation can perceive when you're full of shit instinctively, because heartfelt conversation kind of means heartfelt conversation. It's not owned by the history or the psyche. A heartfelt conversation exists outside of the person. The person discovers a dimension in themselves in the heartfelt conversations that was really governing their life all along. The discovery of it has a kind of marriage takes place with the discovery of the energies running through your life. So you see that the discovery of it integrates into your life as if, and that is the real marriage that one is moving towards in life. There's practice marriage in the form, but then you also see that one is having a conversation that appears to them as a mystery hidden in plain sight. but that somehow the next phase of the life is coming from a genuineness that is not so much part of the psyche survival as much as is that it experiences a creative dimension in its life, and those time then moves, instead of survival being literal time into a future, you see as creative time, where you're exploring the life as it is. And I feel then for most of us in relationship, we've experienced creative time. And then as the relationship literalized or was lost, we start to experience literal time again. But there are discoveries in relationship and experiences of parallel time. But in that parallel time, the element to explore means a genuineness in yourself. So once one starts to explore a parallel time, they meet a creative life being lived while their normal life is being lived. And as they perceive that, they start to see the everyday as a creative act, no longer as normally described. But then you see life itself is a kind of interaction and a creative agreement between forces in yourself. And as that somehow becomes aware, there is an I and thou element there's a conversation with the mystery through the history. There's an event waiting in the story. But that one is being there for it, somehow in a presence. And I feel that this is not spelled out in literal what to doism, because the mistake is as beautiful as knowing what to do. It's not so much a convincing, the relationship that one has is no longer based on performance. One can goof with performance and all of this, but it's no longer literally that. I think there's an attraction and then there's an assumption of different expressions. So I do feel that in absence and in presence, there is a conversation going on, and the conversation materializes at times. And I feel that the next element of the experience is a non-possessive in terms of relationship, but something that opens up the doorway or releases the forces. So that's, I think that all of us are having something of the experience, our own version of the experience in some way. And also in a kind of, at the same time that we're living and time is passing, there has been a remarkable feeling of time standing still. So you can see simultaneously that all of these things can be happening. And that in absence, there can be an event taking place that's waiting that will express itself in time.
Mm.
And as we explore, we see that the relationships that we had, it looks like it broke up in a literal event, but you see it was breaking up all along.
Yeah.
So then you visit almost science, you visit almost a parallel flux, where you see that you intuit the flux, but you build on a continuity. So that there are these elements running in your own life, where the life is in flux, and yet you have a continuity of the self. And it's a remarkable creative act. The perception of the creative act releases the story from its slavery. You see then, the deeper you see, it releases the story from its history. And you release your parents and the past from its history. You understand that it was more of a creative experience that took place. And growing up and living or whatever is actually, in retrospect, you see it's almost totally a creative experience, lost in a literal experience of survival and keeping it together and what to do. So the person is preoccupied with elements that are happening naturally that it only has a sense of. But when it has a deeper sense of it, it sees a soulful existence lived in a literal sense. But that there's a soul journey in a body. The soul enters, we'll call it the soul, the mystery enters into a regular body.
Mhm.
And somehow the person experiences entering into their body, and the story is no longer the literal story any longer. a journey takes place. I feel that in our circumstance, a perception takes place, that a soulful element enters into the story. And the soulful element is forcing a genuineness that is not normal in the society. You start to experience the fakeness of the literal world.
Yes.
That it's just to take care of your loneliness or take care of this issue. So you see that the psyche owns the world in that sense. And yet there is a yearning in you for something authentic. But you also see that there is a resistance in the world to anything authentic. It tries to co-opt authentic, own it, make believe. If it sees something authentic, it buys all its songs. It buys this, it makes a business out of it. So it introduces a method or a motive to something that was happening creatively. And that motive is continuity, and it usually has make a buck as its measure.
Mhm.
But you also see that the creative person in that will also be naive about the ways of making a buck for a reason, because most of the ways of making a buck violate something deeply. Because in a competitive society, one eats, three don't eat in some weird way. So then you start to see, once you become aware of this, then you see it's not, and then there's a cooperative that comes out of the perspective. You start to see that life interaction. So they've tried to capture that in politics and circumstance and socialism, or that's a cooperative of people. And that means they don't take advantage of each other and lie to each other. They're sharing, it's like a family or something. So that was their sense of something. The literalization of that, I don't know, that you can force that. It's like then it becomes like the Communist Party where you force people when it has to come. It's more like a movie for us, that everyone in the movie somehow creatively is into it.
Mm.
And now you see that life for us and what we're sharing is that the people are into it. And so there are hey baby moments again when some crisis is happening or some issue is happening, that it's really around, hey baby, are we still into this? If there's an agreement that you're still into it, then you can, then the way comes out of that agreement. That's waiting in the wings somehow. It's an agreement anyway, but it's revealed. Some incident reveals it in a way. So I'm saying that we're living this life anyway, but an incident reveals the dimensions of it, that all along you get to see the movie of your life, meaning you see it was not literally a life being lived, but a creative process was taking place. And once you perceive that creative process, you have an eye and down relationship, even with your own body. And when you have an eye and down relationship, you see the difference between discretion and aloneness. And then you see where the world makes you into a sneak or a liar or this or that, where you have to hide what would have been a normal process that was happening in you. There's a desire to love deeply. And when the literal relationship is missing that experience, you see there's part of the brain that is looking. That part of the brain is punished, challenged, but it's once that is awakened, there is a conversation in the absence and in the presence. So there will be an event waiting in the circumstance that was hidden in plain sight. There are many lives being lived within the one life. And that when the creative aspect of life becomes your life, then you see you're sharing an experience. And the feeling then allows you access to something that was hidden in plain sight. And then you see your moments when it is in flux or flighting, or that there is a moments of hey baby conversation, not so much around the continuity, but are we still into it? So reflection enters into the story. And reflection, not so much around the doing, but really looking at itself reflectively until you touch something in yourself that can say honestly, because you understand it is around some kind of creative honesty. It's not the brute honesty of the world. It is a creative honesty. That there's a hey baby conversation hidden in the story because you understood that somehow you took it for granted. And it's natural. There's no technique of getting out of it or something like that. It is natural because it is forcing an honest experience. The literalness of the circumstance is creating an event that is forcing a hey baby conversation. And I feel that as one becomes aware of this, it's not so much the doer owns the story. You start to see the life more from the creative perspective and what really fits into the creative expression. So that dimension, even you see, a survival of the story is only an aspect of the creative life, no longer the dominant factor. You are doing survival long enough to have the experience. But somehow creatively you see there's an experience waiting in the life. And that the literalness of the life is to create a form so that it can have a creative experience that it's having with living and dying all the time anyway. It's having in issues. But the question that it's having is living and dying. And you see it runs through the body and it runs through the being. And it gives birth to a who am I question. But there is a question that is happening within one's own body. And you could see that, holy shit, when you discover that conversation, I'm discovering a conversation between the kidneys and the liver and the lungs and all along, and the immune system. They've been working, having this secret affair with each other that I discover. You understand? Okay. And we know theoretically that all these things are happening, but when you meet them as a happening, you see a cooperative taking place without your literal knowledge. When they try to have literal knowledge, they want to correct it or force it to do this, but you are meeting it for the first time. And when you're meeting your life and your body for the first time, not only as your possessive body as an ownership, but esoterically meeting the body, compassionately meeting the body. It's not the body. You meet a life that's been happening all along. That's seen from those feelings in you reveal a whole other dimension that has been happening parallel. The only thing is the revelation has to come from a true place. You must be in a space yourself in order to see that space. And I say, why? Because the doer will try to own it and make it into a business and make, you understand? So immediately the doer makes artificial the insight and makes it into a collective thing to sell products for your own well-being. So, but you also understand that the genuineness of the experience is not a contrivance, it's not a wellness feature. It is, in fact, that you experience your own life from a different place. And that different place is a different place. It means that it's not the ownership of the life or the dial. It is, its only basis is to see. And that seeing itself is a dynamic that's transformed. Because inherent in seeing, true seeing, there's discovery. Discovery changes the picture for one's ownership. That you see that you are involved in this remarkably creative process called an individual life. And that there are moments as you experience it that you will experience dimensions of the experience that are hidden in plain sight. When we share, we bring a kind of dimension to the story where it is not owned by a psychological problem or this or that. You see, the psychological problems were kind of written into the story in a way. But we have a peep of the life that we've lived, which is remarkably sane. And it is not the sanity of the psychoanalysis or the sanity of that, but it is the sanity of being in the audience watching a film and seeing the story unfold, where you see it. You don't have to do anything. you see more than those people who are locked into this literal story. You see a story unfolding. There's a moment when you see your own life unfolding. So then you also see it's not what to do and how should you see that somehow the experiences have been remarkably creative. And that somehow events would not let you to commit something that wasn't true, just to be sane or just to be this or to be that. That somehow you are having a conversation with a genuineness. And you start to see the organized world and how it in fact avoids genuineness by making an impression of genuineness. But you see that you have an inner journey with experience. And it may take the dumb form of, hey, baby. And I say it does take this dumb form usually because it's not, the motive isn't there. You're not approaching the moment with a motive. There is an insight or some moment shared. So I'm saying that we are seeing situations where there are instant relationships that come out of a momentary conversation, that if you meet them, if you met them on a park bench and you had a conversation, there was an insight in it. Every time you see that person, you share that insight. And then you share each other's literal story as you're walking past. But then once you have an insight into that, even in the glance of the person, there's a shared experience. And then if you see, let's say you share that experience with some, then if you see them in jail, you share them, okay. If you see them in this circumstance, you share that feeling with them in that circumstance. But you're not in that circumstance. You're seeing what they experience in that circumstance because you're friends with them. So your friendship with them allows you to experience what they're going through, even more than what they're going through. Because for most of us, the continuity is based on a suppression.
Yeah.
And so when you start to suppress normal feelings, you turn those normal feelings into shitty, sneaky feelings. You understand? And then you get busted for shitty, sneaky movements. And I said, well, hold it, what was happening? And I say, look, there was such a longing for a feeling. That you see the stage was put there, okay. And what is the stage? The deep, profound reflection. You see there is an element now running through the person's life of a who am I, since it's no longer biological, since it's no longer historical, since it seems to be freed from the literal. And let's say you even have an impression of your relationship to parents where you want a different life. You don't want to, okay. So let's say you are then seeing the need to karmically shift something. All unbeknownst to the self, a creative process is taking place. So then you start to see within that framework, arguments will happen, but it is reflective of a happening. There's an attempt to free the story from its history. And yet there's a commitment to the history as an imperative. So it's made that the desire to free the story, so to live a life from the history is it then has to be a sneak. Because it interrupts the status quo. And in being a sneak, it becomes sneaky.
Yeah.
And they say, well, hold it. Why do I have to be a sneak about trying to live a genuine expression? And they said, there's no evidence of what a genuine expression means. That the person released from the history, it depends on how, if in fact an event releases you from the history, then you still have a respect for the history as the mystery. But if in fact you don't see that, you see the history as oppressive, you may have to commit violence, okay, literally do this or that, because you've literalized. And I say, no, perceptively, you see something that frees the story from the possessiveness. And you see then the creative act of your own life. How you doing? Now here's Seth. Remember Seth?
Mhm.
Remember Kai?
Yeah. How's it going?
How are you, Seth?
Good. Hey, Mary. What's up?
So, you know, Seth has a workshop back there.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're on the property?
Yeah, on the back, they turned it, Segway turned it into a 3D printing thing back there, and then
Mm.
has his own workshop.
In the stalls back there?
Hmm?
And what were the horses' stalls?
No, the horses are not there. Pot plants. Mary has about 10 big plants out there. And in fact, I went out there and fell the other day. Pretty remarkable.
Mm.
You know, how I just caught, well, a hose caught my foot and now it turned, but nothing
Oh.
happened bad. But it was right there. It could have been on the way out immediately. You know? And then Segway went back there and immediately started putting bricks down on the floor and made a path out there. And so it was pretty interesting to see that things that could never have happened before just automatically happening and are looking out for each other.
Yeah.
So, and yet it's normalized throughout this last 3 years with all this stuff going on and okay, everything happened. So it's been okay. What do you think? And then we're growing a lot of our own. Again, with the fires and the drought, everything is up in the air. And this
Yeah.
profound drought that's happening here. So, but again, it was only in the papers today to take precautions. We have not done anything at all, I think, you know.
What would precautions be? Just
Precautions.
so if you had to
probably
leave on a,
save, but probably you should store what you want to save, you know, so you don't have to run out with anything. And so that you, so no, that makes common sense. They say what you want to save and not get lost to the fire or to the circumstance. You may put aside or put someplace or something will save them. So this way you don't have to do it when you, if you need to rush out.
that would be all the artwork in the house? That's a lot.
I don't know that I would do that. You know, I don't know, you know, so do I see myself running just like the vaccination? Do I see myself getting the vaccine? I would have put it. So what we're doing is saying maybe mañana, it's not so bad. It's just the air, you know, even though we saw a cloud yesterday that was so big and so dense and just sitting there
Oh,
on the other side of the mountain. And it looked like it was a mountain itself, the cloud of smoke.
wow.
But it was waiting 10 miles away or so. So here, again, we've had the dirty air, smoky air circumstance. Should we prepare?
I don't know. Oh boy. You wouldn't want to lose all that
Okay,
artwork.
so now, once they put that in the paper, and then we say, okay, should we then put Segway and turn him crazy and start preparing, getting fire extinguishers and putting things here and doing that? So let's say Segway can do a lot of things we can't do. Where he'll save this and get that ready and wrap this up and do all that. Okay. So once it's released, but would I do that myself? I may take a thing or two that has a kind of affection and relationship to it, but would I save it all? I don't know.
Hmm.
Unless it's now planned in some way, let's do this or do that. So look, we're kind of like that, aren't we? We're letting it be people at the same time that we understand what you're talking about, maybe preserving this or caring for that, maybe caring for all your old letters or something like that, or, you know, or some of the photographs of the experience. You know. So you understand all that. There is it's feelings that you're caring for and sharing for. And then if I look at something and I remember how I got it and how it came to me. So to me, the artwork is a conversation of trades that I've had. And they've kind of introduced me to something that I didn't fully know, that my father was an artist, that my father was a muralist, and that's what he did in his life. And as a kid, I kind of resisted, even if I had to help him with it. I disliked it very much.
Yeah.
It was literal, you know. But then I discovered that I grew up in an atmosphere that I discovered 50 years later in artwork or whatever. And so the artwork is more like crypto. Before it was crypto. So I can see why it's becoming crypto now, because it was always crypto. It was trades between people, where you can look at it and figure out if the value is going up or down in the moment, So you knew there was a market out there, but you were not so much in the market literally, but you kind of had a running sense of the value of something.
Mhm.
So I had a running sense that the art would pay off the house if I died. With my own mind's eye, that people would look at the stuff and then say, hey, this thing is worth 10,000. That's, so my feeling is that I think what people walked past and didn't look at, if I died, they would look at it.
Yeah.
Look at it, they would see there's a whole other thing in it. It's not just a painting or this or that or a picture, but it plays where is it in the world? If you look it up, you can see it has a running value. It may be worth this and maybe that. And so to me, that was the sense of crypto before crypto, was that we were living that way anyway. We were trading. We were doing a lot of things. People traded their services with it. So we were kind of living our life. And so there was a trust in it. And so there was shared experience. In retrospect, I see that what I can't get in crypto and figure it out, I can figure out here what this is worth, what that period that came from, just by looking at it. But I don't do the literal market that way. That's the literalized. I did what happened in our sadhana of trading between friends that came and this weird experience, and where I learned about that world and I learned about this world. So inherently the philosophy is there where you're in it, but not of it. So once you got of it and you saw the market, man, you saw the shit they pulled on each other then.
Mm.
So what was friendly in trading could become mean in business.
Mhm.
But when you had some friendship in the business aspect, you can just go up into the situation and you know what I mean? So somehow a friendship in the literalness was like having a friend who's your doctor,
Mhm.
but he also knows the style and life that you live in.
Yeah.
So somehow he's kind of caring for you within that framework that you're in. So let's say a hypoactive life was not exactly wrong for you because that's more your style of living. And, even the Shanti is, I could expect Shanti will be hypothyroid. Let me see what else. Meditation, everything that you were doing has a slowing down of the process, not
It
speeding
very
it up.
much does.
But then you also have to see if it's veering too far.
Mm.
So now I say, okay, I'm managing something in my body and you're having symptoms, but you also see that the literalness of the symptoms, okay, so then I'm managing the symptoms. You'd like it not to be too stupid or naive, but you also like it to still be a conversation with yourself. So I'm working with that generally. And I think that with some of the, there's a friend doctor who'll come out to the house anytime, and he volunteers that, and and his wife sometimes worked at the store. Blair works very friendly with everyone, so they consider that my dad. I've never met him, and he's never come over, but he's my dad. I don't have a doctor per se, for actual examination to tell you what's right. I only have the one doctor for the specific thing of putting the tube inside of you and seeing or taking out the cancer that was there. But again, it's a natural process, the cancer of that bladder. It is not, that's why you have an examination yearly, because the process came back. But then I once took this BCG 16 years ago and it went away. So, and then it came back again. But what the BCG did was awaken the immune system to something. So I've been working with that. And just this idea. And then sometimes when I need the medical advice and I go in to get a perspective on something that's happening.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
kind of,
that's like
Hmm?
I found a wonderful doctor and that's what I did. And I think I can have conversations like that with her.
and you're seeing Dr. Joe and others, so that's part of something. So I think that in what they're suggesting, what they have, well, I think it's a pretty common challenge, the thyroid condition. I think it comes with a spiritual life in some way, or a
Yeah, and I mean also my body's changing because I'm in my 50s and I don't know. I do feel like I'm gaining weight. So there's all kinds of things going on with my body.
So what I do for that is I go out in the daytime and I do my club exercises out there, but it's more, and eye exercises of just releasing it, but it's more in setting the condition. I
Mhm.
mean, the circadian rhythm, exposure. There are certain times, even if you stick your head out the window, that you're setting your clock.
And that's related to pineal gland.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Ursula could be really knowledgeable in that. Right? Ursula, have you explored that form very much?
Mm, it
Well,
has affected me.
you suffered the condition.
Yes.
You've been treated for it, and you're being treated now, no?
And I've never had to change, I've been lucky. I take very little and I've never had to change the dosage.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
Um,
but you are managing it, so you understand that there is a kind of pain that comes with it. And that's when, in fact, it's too slow.
mm,
Then there is a kind of ache, usually in the neck or certain parts of it that are actually a thing is happening.
yes. Oh, yes.
And so if it's too low, it's not providing energy to the body. It
Which
then,
would be to digest food and fat.
what happens is it's not able to provide energy to the rest of the body. So
Yeah.
it provides it only to certain parts of the body. So certain other parts of the body starts to atrophy
Ooh,
because it starts to provide, it has a misreading and it's supposed to provides only for the most important, for the heart, for the breathing,
mm,
but it starts to let go of the feet and the hands and things like the circulation in some way. From what my experience is, that anytime so slowing down normally is not bad to live in that state,
yes.
to kind of have a meditative lifestyle in some sense. But then in the process slowing down itself, you'll start to see symptoms because it's actually leaving the body. It's kind of leaving parts of the body are not getting any energy.
But I still enjoy moving the body, like do free
Yeah, but
form.
once you introduce something to it, you see a process that's taking place. Then you see it's not exactly an illness. It's been normally happening anyway. But then your awareness of it
Yeah.
introduces something that most people don't have. Most of them would then go into a certain state of depression or a certain acting out or whatever that would be normal for them. That runs through the family, maybe.
Yeah.
So you see that generally, if it's left to its own devices, if you completely sink
Yeah.
into it,
Yeah.
then there is a kind of removal from the world that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So I think to some degree, well, what we have is awareness. Now, awareness doesn't mean knowing as much as seeing, that somehow when you see it, you're caring for it in a way through consciousness, not
Mhm.
literally caring for it by doing something, but by seeing that you're in a phase of your life
Yeah.
where there is the phase of your life is introducing dying as a normalcy,
Mhm.
because you're getting a hint of that slow down process in the life. So I feel that my experience of that has been again around the sadhana, that
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, and that it can be the hypo aspect of it was something we were trying to achieve, but then when it becomes literalized, then you'll start to have pains and problems. Hmm? But at this point in time, you're still okay, Kai. No, you're not overwhelmed with it. Hmm?
No, I mean, no, I mean, I've been having some weird symptoms, but I think it'll go away. I don't feel like it's going to stick around, but I'm very weak and I have a lot of shaking inside. I don't know how else to describe it, but my inner self is shaking and
Yeah.
I can't do much. I don't have any strength. So I feel like it's just a process I'm going through. I don't feel like it's anything big.
No, I feel that that's what's also happening for me. It's a process I'm going through. But
Yeah.
what it's reflecting,
Mm-hmm.
um, what it's deeply reflecting for me, I probably would die before I live a lie
Yeah.
at this point. In other words, not because I'd be even choosing. That's
Mm,
jumped in my head now. So basically, I really am hanging out because there is some affection and love shared. And there's a hey baby. It's as goofy as that, but not so goofy. Other than that, it's pretty uninteresting scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that, not that it's uninteresting in reality. It's say when there is no interest in it, means that you're aware of a process happening to you. So you see that you're having more of a conversation with your own, with a personal love life. There's a kind of aloneness in the story. And that aloneness, you may online be able to articulate more than you can in the situation you're in.
yes, that's true.
So in that, it's not a flaw to have a low, it's saving your life. It's allowing you to get along in a situation that you would have had a lot of arguments in. So let's say it's not so dumb. You may have to measure it and modulate it, but it is not a flaw. You've been able to use that feeling to disassociate yourself from a trip if it's too lame for you. So let's say let's say I'm thrown into a jail cell of a bunch of criminals. I can go in that state where I'm in it, but I'm not of it.
Mhm.
You understand? And I say, okay. And I say, what does that mean? I'm managing being in it, but not of it. And my body is managing it for me also. And I'm kind of managing my own, taking care of myself as if I'm taking care of the baby, where some of it has intelligence in it. I'm out of the literal story. And I share a story with friends.
Hmm.
But my main feature in the circumstance is looking out for the grace of some. So you see, holy shit, man, if you really see it all, you see how heavy duty it is the everyday.
Mm,
And
Yeah. Yes.
if I'm there with you and I don't know all that, I will get pissed off with you sometimes over nothing. I'll say, why? Because she won't agree. So let's say, or then I'll be attracted to you because you, so you want the job. But when it gets diagnosed, then you kind of are caring for something then. Hmm? Or you kind of introduce another aspect to it. And I say, what is that going to be? And that somehow you're going to have to get these crazy people to wake up a little bit and see, don't give you such a bullshit time. You've kept something together in a situation that would have been very disastrous if you didn't hang around. And so my feeling is how much it tells you about what you're doing is limited, but I feel from my perspective, it won't even let you go crazy or anything like that. Somehow you are sane, you are doing something. You've always been free to go out of there, but it has to release you by being such absolute bullshit. So let's say, as long as it speaks to you, it exists. And I feel that myself in a circumstance, all of us are having some element of that happening in our lives. Like Urja says that her daughter visits, she's visiting this or that. Well, her neck is like that. You know? Okay. So if those people who have such important things happen say, Urja, how are you feeling? What's good? So that part is missing. They say, hey, what's happening? So she's tending to their hurts.
Mhm.
But her hurt, she has to go in the bathroom and hide it. Okay. You want the job, Urja? It pays very little, and they'll give you a kick. But somehow, if you say, hey, my neck hurts, they'll say, why do you leave us alone already? We've got more important things happening. So let's say, do you want the job? It's a voluntary job,
Yes.
and that's living.
Yes.
But then living somewhat consciously doesn't mean conscious as literal or the boss of a story. It means that it illuminates the story. What happened?
Oh, just that's about to go.
Oh, you're about to go then in a minute? Yeah, okay. Everything okay? Okay. I think you're wearing Nautica underwear.
Oh, yeah.
So I could see the name there. No, that was funny. Maybe I must be doing the same then. I think if I lift up my shirt. What was that? What show are you watching?
That new one that's kind of like The Wire.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as good as The Wire.
No.
Beyond the City.
Have you seen Come On, Come On?
No.
Have you seen Come On, Come On?
No.
Where he's taking care of the little boy. He takes his nephew to New York because his family's falling apart, and the kid's pretty cool.
The movie?
Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix is having.
Oh, yeah, I want to see
And
that.
then
Yeah.
someone mentioned, who mentioned to me that they were, oh, Sandy, who's visiting here today. Remember Sasha, her son, Sasha, the musician? So Sasha knows Joaquin Phoenix pretty well. You know, he's had his wife pass away, and he's had a premature birth child, the same as what I described about the child that I had. It was also a time and a half. The mommy died afterwards, really intensely. And the boy seems to be great, is doing really great. And Sasha's there. Well, what a story that they went through. And the boy, I remember he had a picture when he was born. He had his hand somewhat on his head and had such a peaceful smile on the face.
Mm.
So then Sandy being here brings up that story and what's happening to them now and how it's unfolding. And then we're seeing all the folks with kids and how they're playing music. The kids are playing music also. Trumpets and everything from trumpets to harpsichords to...
That's great.
No, so there may be a meeting of the kids and they're all around. I think he's 5 to 13 or 14 now is this span of kids that are popping up in our family of friends.
How old is Eric's son?
How old is Eric's son? 11? Ando, yeah.
Oh, he's
And,
a little younger.
hmm?
He plays an instrument, no?
Trumpet.
Yeah, no, he's really big with the instruments there. So let's say you can't plan the meeting, can you? But it does seem to me that there is a similarity of ages and interests,
Yes.
flux flying overhead, where somehow the kids are born free.
That's nice.
Somehow it's a bit different than when you organize kids into how they should live and what they should do.
Yeah.
But that somehow they just share the environment with you deeply. And sharing the environment, it kind of allowed them to find their expression.
Yeah.
Rather than have it laid on them in the beginning. So what happens in the relationship is that it's coming from dharma more than karma. And they kind of realize that the parents are staying together to care for them. So somehow they're aware of the energies in the circumstance to some extent, not literally aware, but they're aware that people are hanging out to look out for them.
Yeah.
And they are, so the awareness is not literally spelled out, but they know when it breaks or when it shifts or something happens. So let's say what you wanted was a shared experience.
Mm.
A moment
Yes.
where you will be able, there will be a moment in time where you will be able to see a happening from a different place. But as it is happening now, everyone's surviving and creating and doing their thing. But in time, it will be seen from a different place, that in fact, there was a creative atmosphere.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I feel that's what's happening. And I do feel that will probably be susceptible to that because I am planning to do that. I am feeling that a balanced immune system is coming more from a slowing down or mellowing of the body.
Mhm.
So the mellowing of the body comes close also to what you say, that it may be a condition that then Alfred can see immediately. Okay, yes, I can see immediately also, and you can see immediately also that you're balancing something. So what did I'll call Alfred again. What did he suggest taking?
Oh, I don't remember, but he did say that and she said this is the side that's swollen of my thyroid, and that's what he said.
That's the same side as me. Yeah.
The right. She said that's common. It's often in the right, but she didn't feel nodules or anything.
No, it seems that you're still in a, generally when it's happening with Urja, she almost is faint then, or fainting while you're up. So I don't know if you've ever experienced like fainting while you're making believe you're still up. Oh yeah, it's okay, but you're really fainting.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
Urja has
Now.
that quality where she's acting like she's nice. It's okay, don't worry. But but you can see that she's kind of fainting.
Mm.
And so then you see the fainting is not so dumb. The fainting is slowing down something somewhat. But at the same time, you do have to check in to see it's okay of passing or whatever. So there is a direct conversation. But I think that as you have the conversation, you change your time relationship to it.
Yes. And if
You see that you've been doing your own experience around the mellowness of the body. That somehow the body kind of had to be in a mellow enough state.
but it seems now
Dumb and not drugged and not knocked out or anything like that somehow. So you see that kind of, from my mind's eye, that aspect of the immune system is around the spiritual life or around another life that's slower or coming from a different time period. So I would say that you may find many of people who have spiritual lives in monasteries or nuns or whatever, you'll also find that they also have a slow working system like that. But that is essential to what they're doing.
Right.
But then if it slips into a condition,
yes. Yeah.
once it slips into the condition, it was probably always happened. It probably always happened. In order to be the nun or the teacher or the something, you probably have to come from that space. And you could see somehow if you're in that space, you see the world from that place. So you try to make a kinder world, a more decent world. So that part of the system, I think, has a human element to it.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's more of a caregiver style, I think, or sharing its lifestyle.
Mm.
I think the hyper is very much ego oriented, becomes captured by the ego, and its life becomes more important than everything else.
Mm.
So I feel there's a difference in the balancing act between the cooperative and the competitive.
Yeah.
And so the competitive sees the world from a different, it sees the cooperative as slowing it down and messing it up when it's goal oriented. And I think that the mellow is not goal oriented as much as experience oriented.
Yeah.
and that the experience will be remembered. The shared life will be remembered through time in different ways.
Mm, mm.
Okay.
Yes.
Did anyone else get on? It was,
Yeah, Michael Bravo was on. He made a bunch of comments.
what did he have to say? I hope it's more mellow now. Or-
Justice for Johnny. Did Johnny Depp win? He said Grace runs through the story.
Did Johnny Depp win?
I don't know. He said justice for Johnny, so I'm not sure what that
Oh,
means.
My feeling is that there's a holy shit moment in looking at. So if you're saying in human relationships, if there's justice for Johnny, it means that you've had a lot of tough times with women in your life. So then you like the idea that he can be a strong dude talking shit like that while he's got a little ponytail going and talking shit. And then whatever she does is acting. Oh, yeah, he did this to me and they did that. But if you look at them, you see that they're regular people who happen to be celebrities now. And how many relationships have you had that resemble that situation? So
Me?
then,
A lot.
if I remember, and myself and others, we've all been in. We don't need Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is a mirror reflection of certain experiences that you've had, and you also understand that you thought it was bullshit when someone else was complaining about what you were doing when you were okay. So then you understand that a Johnny Depp isn't. I can't say hero for Johnny Depp because it does seem that a hurt runs through the story. And anytime the feeling that connected something is lost and it literalizes, then the very thing that was a cooperative becomes war. So that's why we were talking about the difference between a feeling allows a cooperation to take place, it opens up a doorway. When the feeling is lost, then you have the very opposite to that, a competitive zone. So then the person literalizes their experience without the feeling. So the feeling allowed you to touch each other's asses. But then when the feeling is lost and the pissed offness is there, then you see the person took advantage of you by grabbing. Who the hell knows what they're grabbing? But somehow they took, and it's true and not true at the same time. With the feeling gone, then it literalizes what happened. The feeling was touched by the experience when it was there. It was shared. In the absence, so we're talking about the feeling then disappearing and then one looking at the life in retrospect. And my mother did this and my father did that. But then I read something or I see something or my father passes and I see a whole other dimension. I say, I'm sorry, Papa, for the bullshit I laid on you. I see another dimension of story that's hidden from me. Me. I'm not taking account of me in the story. So when I find out 20 years later there was a me in the story, I meet the me. So I'm talking about meeting one's life. There are events coming your way that will kind of challenge the reflection. The being there for it. And the being there for it is not courageous and so what it is, in fact, you're recognizing your life as a creative process somehow. You freed the story from its literalness. You freed the parents from their literalness as parents, and you gave them simple people who were doing parents. And in releasing that perceptively, you see more the creative aspect of the life than the literalness of it. And you see that you then had a journey, that there is an experience waiting out there in the mystery for you. And that somehow the next phase of the experience, but this was like a trial, the experience of our life was more of a rehearsal of life. I think from this phase now, one goes into the story as a full creative being. And that means that you're caring for something. And that means that when relationship comes your way, it is conscious. That it is no longer built around the psychological aspects, the hurt, the system, the shtick. That was the rehearsal. Now it seems to me that we're coming into genuineness, where it's not literally spelled out, but the bullshit is spelled out. So bullshit meaning that it was coming from more of a psychological need and hurt than it, and it was coming more from the karma of the story. When the next phase of the love affair is not coming from the history, it's coming from a shared mystery. Because there's a baby that comes at it. It doesn't have to literally be the baby, but there is a creative act that comes out of that merger. The only thing is it has to be a merger, a true thing. And I don't know that it's George Washington true or literal truth like that by laws or legal systems, but it is a kind of almost at the movie. If it has you crying at the movie, it has a truth running through it. It touches you.
Yeah.
So I feel that the next aspect of the relationships is no longer coming from the psychological karma of life. And so that's why it will seem it's not loneliness, it's aloneness. Because your body and your being can't lie any longer. It can't just try to satisfy a psychological need when its longing is for true love. And true love means that you bring that to the story. If you're looking for that, then you bring that. You no longer bring a psychological you to the story that needs to be helped by some. That I think happens perceptively. You see, there's a literal survival dialogue of existence where relationship is around survival. And then you see there's a dimension of life that they always try to reach where it comes out of pure poetry. That the aloneness is a form of relationship. It's having a conversation. The loneliness is not. The loneliness is trying to cure itself but its measure is continuity. I think that the aloneness is measure is the soulfulness of the story. So I feel that once one is touched by that, one is creating a circumstance around them where it's possible. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny.
I hope Michael Bravo heard some of that. I remember you from a long
Yeah,
time.
he did.
Thanks
He
for
said-
hanging out. And thanks for giving me a kind of sense of something so I can explore it. Because until you asked that or related that question about Johnny Depp, I was looking at it from a different space. But now you opened it up for me because I was saying, holy shit, look at this. And how the hell is this on? And then Ukraine is on next after Johnny Depp. And
Yeah.
who's hurt and how many people are dying, who's killing. And
Yeah.
so then I say, okay, but then once you frame the question that way, then it has me looking at the media and regular people being exposed. They're every day being exposed. And when the everyday is being exposed in some way, when it's literally like that on trial, but in fact, when it is in fact, you perceive your own life that you've lived, there is a holy shit dimension that's in it, where you can say, I'm sorry, baby, where it's not literally sorry, you are sorry, but you see the creative process that you were in. And you see how people then, how you karmically, but in retrospect, you see it was purely a creative process. The love feeling, the love sharing in its origins created an opening. As it literalized, it's like the Bindu point. There's love in the beginning, and then you add time and space and you find hate. And it looks like the hate comes out of an incident. So they blame the incident, but you see the incident is more reflective of a process that was happening. So in retrospect, you see that the broken heart is not some prison sentence. The broken heart is in fact a doorway to seeing where the life was not your life. You see the life from the perspective, I describe it as sitting in the front seat watching a movie of your life where you can't do anything about it or you don't own it. And it's revealed to you. And as it's revealed to you, it frees the story. So then the remaining time in the story is not literal time, it's evocative time. So you're not forcing the body to live longer or shorter. You're no longer buying that sentiment in the world. You see that you're living it deeply. If deeply lives longer, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then what is deeply? I say, even in the passage of your body, there will be memory.
Mm.
So you see, then you're not confined to the body. The life that you've lived has an experience within the framework of the body. But then when it passes through the body, it shifts into different aspects, memory, this and that. That has, in fact, more of a dynamic. The memory releases the story sometimes where the physical can't. Where you dream of someone or you dream of a circumstance and you have an insight to actually what happened. And in having an insight to what happened, it releases a story from your possessor.
Mm.
And then an incident happens where you hear from that experience once it's been released from a different place. I
Mhm.
say, and with each other, we experience the life as a journey. And that the experiences that we have are not so literalized as a possessive, but that the experience you have changes the picture somewhat creatively. And the life then resembles 5 or 10 movies that you were in more than anything else. You start to see how many aspects of the life that you've lived being you, the thread of you running through all these expressions in the story. So Johnny Depp, what do you say, Spiro?
Oh, I have no idea.
You know, Michael, when it comes to a kind of violence, that ain't our family so much. You know what I mean? So generally, if the violence literalizes, where you're actually hurting someone or shooting someone, okay. So I think we would be schmucks in that regard, because something in us is inherently nonviolent. It doesn't spell out what it is, but it doesn't choose itself so much over the other. So somehow we may be schmucks that way, that the original people, in other words, if you see someone hungry, you may share your food. So we're schmoes that way. Okay. And I say, why? A shared life, if we're touched by something, you see that it doesn't belong to you alone. The shared thing allows it to be shared once you see it or once you perceive it. So you see that there are dimensions hidden in the life that are waiting for an experience outside. But you also see that the attraction will create a love relationship, but as it literalizes, then it's starting to decompose anyway. So then there are events. It looks like the events are causal, but I think the events are reflective of a thing as it's changing and as it's shifting. As the feeling is lost, there are events waiting to change the plane. I don't know that the events are causal. I think that something has shifted and then the events come that reflect. So then there is the possibility not to preserve something, but to see the truth of something. There's a hey baby conversation. Are we still into this? And I feel that the hey baby conversation has a kind of honesty or integrity to it, that the first measure for it is that it's real. Then we can work it out. But if the sentiment isn't there any longer, or the feeling isn't there any longer, it's not some therapeutic thing that has to be overcome. The preservation of the form without the feeling is not the dynamic. For us, that somehow a sentiment enters into the story that you can work with, or there's a creative challenge that's happening. So then you start to see the life not only owned by its history, but that it itself is a creative act. And the creative act, once perceived, has its own integrity. And it's not so much the rules of the world, the integrity, it's more the integrity of creating something. And you understand you're trying not to sell out. The world forces you to sell out for one reason or another, but somehow you're attempting to keep the integrity of the expression going. So that's why I mentioned money means freedom from money. It doesn't mean continuously building power through money. It means freedom from that trap, so that one is creatively free to express themselves and to be with and share. So I feel that to some degree, as a community, we've been experiencing some dimensions of that, where almost everyone is doing their thing. Uh, so that it comes more from a heartfelt expression, where work is not literally slavery or work or literally that, but something that you're into as an expression of yours. So if you were there in the Johnny Depp moment with them and he was on the floor in the bathroom and he crying and complaining, and supposedly, if you were there, what sense would you have of the story? That both of them were pretty weird or stuck in a situation, or?
I've been in that relationship
Okay, I
and
understand.
I've been the victim and I was just as bad.
I understand.
Aw.
I understand. And so you empathize, because anyone could have said, hey, if you don't like it, what the hell are you guys doing? They said, fine, get lost, brother. And yet somehow they had to continue getting the shit kicked out of themselves or doing this or doing that. And I say, wasn't I in that? And I say, yeah, holy shit, man. I was, how many holy shit relationships? I just told you about the boy that was premature and this and that. And that was a time when we were young people. There was drugs in the stories, secret lives, all kinds of trips. When I mentioned that Michelle, when we were kids, came out of an acid, first use of acid over a weekend when we first introduced LSD, and it was this whole erotic making love weekend there. Okay, so is it natural? Does a person come out of a natural life? It came out of our weird life.
Did I tell you Naropa also came out of an acid trip?
Yeah.
That's
No,
true.
that's why I mentioned once with Naropa around the mosh pit existence.
Now I-
You know, but I screwed up. I think I mentioned that to the stepfather or the mother that about what they were asking what happens with Naropa. And I says, you know, when you come out of a mosh pit, which we kind of did, mosh pit meaning friends making love or a circumstance like that where it was natural, where all of a sudden people who didn't even know each other that long, but all of a sudden had an affection and a relationship occurred. And it was normalized. It was a very normal situation. So we call it a mosh pit, meaning that even when doctor came over the first time from India, we had to live in the Bronx. I had only a one-room apartment. There were about 30 people in one bed. But that also freed doctor from the Indianness of his life, seeing the Americanness, which was this friendly kind of situation that we had when we went up to Woodstock and he lived in a teepee out there or whatever, or a tent, because the guy threw him out and he was always suffering. So there was always some woman caring for him or nurturing him because he was always on the brink of his health maybe going. And natural. And I think that Naropa also came out of such a circumstance. Okay, so there's a certain kind of life that is lived in that. But he also came out of an acid trip or something?
I don't think he left the mosh pit.
No,
He's
no,
always
I never
crawling
did.
back
No,
in,
but we
trying
mentioned
to
it.
crawl back into the mosh pit.
No, I feel that it gave him a life and it taketh away. You know, that somehow the experience gave you an expression that was normal. And remember how normal it was when I first met you. Okay. And how you were living in San Francisco and what you were doing. So you thought it was normal, right?
With Naropa.
It was normal, yeah, with Naropa. So let's say you had to have the experience. Johnny D saved your life to some degree.
Well, you saved my life.
He saved your life by shifting the plane somewhat from the ashram.
Introducing me to you.
I think so, because in introducing you to me, you lived in an atmosphere where you were kind of free. So what did you do? You did some massage in the store at times, and you did this, and you did singing, you sang together here, and okay. And you made it normal, but it was complete movie. A complete movie that everyone was in, that we made it normal. So they say, what happened? They say, you know, I don't really know what happened. And I say, what it is an immersive. It's the day-to-day becomes natural.
Yeah.
And I feel that yeah. Did it affect the story? I think, yeah, it did. Somehow you had some creative agreement to do this, create this family.
Yeah.
Okay. And that somehow you understood that the element of this place was being there for you in a pinch. That somehow you were free to try your thing coming out of the situation. Take a shot and give it. If you get in over your head, there's a fallback position of recreating yourself, in other words. So let's say we then had a situation when you came from here, it was more of a creative act that you were doing.
Mhm.
So failure or success was not so much the measure. What was the measure if you started to see it was becoming violent
Mhm.
by possessiveness or ownership or something like that? And you
Mhm.
saw that they were making it normal, that possessive, you're this religion, you're this background, so they own you. And I say, oh, man,
Yeah.
it's been a purely creative act for me. And as long as there's a
Mhm.
human feeling, I can be with it. But you're not going to explain away the loss of a human feeling by some religious shtick. Okay. So somehow we're religious. If the religion is a reflection of the religiousness, that's fine. If the religion goes off on its own and starts dictating how to live, and that means you'll live without love because God wants you to have a baby and God wants you to do this and got the wrong dude. Somehow there has to be a feeling in the story for me to be in it. I find. And if it's the feeling is not shared, then I'm a kind of stranger in a strange land in the circumstance. I'm visiting it, but I'm not of it in that way. So somehow, you see, you have a relationship with some kind of truth that is not laid out as a truth, but somehow creatively, if something vulgar happens, it releases you from the story. So somehow there has to be an appreciation of a human thing happening. But I feel then that your body is going to be an instrument of measurement of what's happening for you. So you've kind of kept it somewhat pure, but somehow if the feeling falls away, I start to feel, then you will feel it physically. So what do you think? The slow process is not exactly a slow process, but when it's too slow, then your health is, restoring your health becomes a problem.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
We're
like
going to
you
do
or
more
whatever.
tests to see if that is indeed what it is. I don't know.
If I also see, okay, I think I know what they're going to find. And I know they're going to want to give me 2 weeks of this heavy penicillin thing and knock out drugs or something like that will throw my body off for a year and a half to some degree, unless I do some other creative fasting or something like. So then you see I'm processing like that anyway. I do the 16-hour overnight fasting as a processing of things. So I feel that I am engaged in a process where living is just simply unfolding like that. But and I feel that each of us are sharing some dimension of that and sharing our friendship, that we're managing our health.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when it literalizes as a condition, I'm also saying yes, but the condition was part of your journey. It was that it's human. So if one is to have human feelings in a world that's getting pretty shitty, where the regular human will have a broken heart over the obvious, then you also understand that one is absent from the literal world. Okay. And so I feel that you have a creative relationship to the literal world that everyone else has an opinion about, but you see it in flux and you see it reflective of something, that there is a brutality that runs through the story that's natural, and then it takes a shape. And that somehow you have a feeling that would not allow you to be brutal. And that somehow they're missing that feeling that you have, that allows them to play out their history. Because anyone seeing it would see that it's a human. So basically, your presence brings a stiller reflection in the situation. But at the same time, you are caring for this. So maybe shared information with Urja as to where it is, the management of something. What do you think? But I'll see you next week,
Thank
or
you,
maybe
Dandy.
Sunday.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Take
Mhm.
care. Okay.
Thanks, Jenny.
See you tomorrow then, Gary.
Okay.